I should have mentioned this in religion class. Could you tip the camera down just a little?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of,
Oh, who talked to the camera?
I think maybe they raise it
Oh,
to get the board in view.
Mhm.
Last night, there was some really sad news in Front Royal. And a girl who my kids know was found unresponsive on her living room floor and ended up dying. I just want people to pray because I don't know what else to do.
I know.
Yeah, she's 17. And I suspect, but I don't know why and how that happened. So it was suicide. 17 years old, and she's a Catholic, well-raised Catholic. I think she had fallen away. So please, would you say a prayer for her name is Claire?
Sure.
Say a prayer for Claire. And also, I don't think this applies to any of you, but in case it does, there's always somebody to talk to, and it can get better, whatever it is. Just don't get so desperate that you think there's no other choice. I know probably none of you even think these things, but the world we live in, it's hard. It's hard to be a teenager, really hard. And I remember in the old days, I was a teenager once too, and I was homeschooled and I was in my basement, but I did synchronized swimming and I did soccer. And this was in the 80s. And I remember some of the stuff the girls talked about. I'm like, what? Where does it come from? And how do you go for that? And it just was a whole nother world that I didn't understand. Some of the stuff that the girls talked about at swimming, I just would literally run out of the locker room. Like, I can't even. I was in the locker room, Bridget, even a homeschooled little me.
You bring it out and just bolted.
I bolted. I couldn't believe what they were talking about. And it was so to be that young and to be that jaded and that disgusting, that dirty, where they go from there, I don't know. But this world, like, that is peanuts compared to this. That's like, SpongeBob compared to what goes on now. It's ridiculous. So none of you escape it. I know it doesn't matter how sheltered you are, you can't escape it. And I just want to say, talk to your parents, talk to an uncle or a godmother or a priest or a teacher or whoever. Just if you're feeling desperate, I'm serious, just don't go there. Don't go get so in on yourself that you think there's no choice. This girl is 17 years old and now her family is devastated. Like, it's the most selfish thing you can do. It's disgusting.
Is she the only child?
No. We very well know her brother. So just don't let the devil deceive you to that point. Get help. That's all I'm saying. I don't think I need to say it to this crowd, but I'm saying it anyway. Now, here we are with Don Quixote and Sancho just got beat up again. And so he's done. So he says, and he mouths off to Don Quixote, and I think he might have done it once or twice before, but all the other times Don Quixote just beat him up. Like, you don't know anything, my squire. But we've noticed that there's this, not exactly trading places, but maybe a meeting in the middle where Don Quixote is listening more to Sancho Panza, and Sancho seems to have come up with some pretty reasonable recommendations that Don Quixote has taken. But and Sancho encouraged Don Quixote to go on this third sally, and it's been pretty peaceful. But Sancho just got beat up again. He's so angry. He yells at Don Quixote and says, I just want to go home. I'm just done. I just want to go home to my wife and kids. Why don't I just get paid and leave? And Don Quixote's like, okay, what do I owe you? And so Sancho starts naming all the things, and I want 2 reals a week times this, and Don Quixote's like, okay. And he's going along with it. He's not getting mad. He's not yelling at him. He's not trying to convince him otherwise. It's just like, okay, what do I owe you? We're at the bottom of 654, and there's a reason I didn't have you finish the chapter yourself. Very good, replied Don Quixote. You see where I am? Very good, replied Don Quixote. Now, to work out the wages you have allotted to yourself, it is 25 days since we left the village. Reckon proportionally and see what I owe you. Then pay yourself, as I have said, from your own pocket. Oh, my lord, cried Sancho, your worship's a long way out in your reckoning. For in the matter of the promised isle, you must count from the day your worship promised it to me to this present hour. Well, how long is it since I made the promise, Sancho? Asked Don Quixote. If I remember rightly, answered Sancho, it must be more than 20 years, to within 3 days more or less. Is that true?
What?
Bridget says no. 20 years?
How long?
Well, it's been 15 years since the first. or
Well,
the first
since the recording of the first Sally, but when we opened the second book, how long did we say Don Quixote had been tied up in his room and not allowed to see his books? It was a month.
Oh.
And before that, how long were they gone? Not that long. And now, according to Don Quixote, it's been 25 days. Where's he getting 20 years?
Maybe he
Because-
doesn't get paid more.
He wants to be paid more. That could be. Also, you know how when you're doing something hard, it seems like time goes so slowly? Or when you're waiting for something good, but you haven't gotten there, it seems like it takes forever. And then when anything good is happening, it's like a roller coaster ride, 2 minutes and it's over.
Yeah, that's so true.
Wait, is he counting every year since he promised,
Mhm.
even if they weren't selling?
Well, but he only, between the second Sally and the third Sally, there was only like a month. And between the first and second, Sancho wasn't on the first Sally. Right? It was just Don Quixote. And then he came home, he's like, I think I need a squire and a better horse. Right? Don Quixote gave himself a great slap on the forehead and began to laugh very heartily. But I hardly traveled for 2 months in the Sierra Morena, or in the whole course of our expedition, and you say, Sancho, that it is 20 years since I promised you the isle? I think you want to absorb all the money of mine you have in your wages. Though if that is so, and it gives you pleasure, I grant you, from now on, and much good may it do you. For rather than have so bad a squire, I shall be glad to be left poor and penniless. But tell me, perverter of the squirely ordinances of knight errancy, where have you ever seen or read of any knight errant squire bargaining with his master with so much a month you will have to give me for serving you? Embark, scoundrel, villain, fiend, you seem to be all three. Embark, I say, on the wide seas of their histories, and if you find that any squire has said or thought as you have spoken, you may nail it on my forehead and plant your 4 fingers in my face to boot. Turn your rein or your ass's bridle and go back home, for you shall not take 1 step further with me. Here we go. Oh, bread ill requited. Oh, promises ill placed. Oh, man more beast than human. Fact? Is this a proper chiding? Now, when I was intending to establish you in state, and in such a state that they would call you lord, despite your wife, now do you leave me? Are you going now, when I had come to the firm and mighty resolve to make you lord of the best isle in the world? Well, as you have said again and again, the honey is hot, is not, etc., etc., etc. An ass you are, and an ass you must be, and an ass you will end when the course of your life is run. For it is my opinion that you will reach its final term before you realize and acknowledge that you are a beast. Can I take a quick poll? What do you think of that, Bridget? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs up. Up,
Oh,
up.
Wasn't Sancho confused? Because didn't
no,
he
but
think that he was getting paid, but Don Quixote left without saying that, without thinking that, but after he said yes, Sancho just kept pushing the button.
Just now he said that?
he was.
At the beginning, before they left, didn't it say that Sancho believed he was getting paid, but Don Quixote wasn't going to
Don
pay?
Quixote's like, yeah, you'll get your money. Like, yeah, there's payment enough. And but Sancho's like, I do need to support my wife and my kids.
So it's a lot more important to Sancho that he gets paid.
Well, it does seem like there is some sort of requirement for sustenance. But he's also not poor because he talked about how well run his farm is, and so it's productive at home. When he got home, his wife wasn't saying, "You left us to starve." Right? Okay, so I don't know. Alsa's picked up on that. Some of them were married, yeah. Mary, thumbs up with this scolding. Anya, thumbs up. Yes. Are we hesitantly saying yes? Nina, what do you think about the scolding? Yes?
Yeah.
Kateri, do you have any problems with what Don Quixote just did? No. Coco, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a problem with it because he should be more understanding and encouraging. After all, Sancho has been understanding and encouraging towards Don Quixote. It seems like when Sancho's finally through with his madness, that Don Quixote should pay him the same courtesy.
Yeah, and Don Quixote's finally starting to feel hungry and tired now, so he should really.
Understand a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the first 2 pages, he's like, okay, I understand. Oh yeah, it would be, yeah, I see. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see. Until Sancho piles on, he's like, really, it's been 20 years and you owe me for 20 years.
But Sancho was the one who started the thing in part
Yes.
7 part.
Well, right, but he got beat up. So he's blaming Don Quixote because that's whose service he's in. Like, if I weren't in your service, this wouldn't be happening.
But you started.
If I weren't a Catholic, I wouldn't have to bloody do this, that, and everything else. So all because I'm a Catholic, all my problems are because I'm a Catholic. And I have to fast and abstain and follow the 10 Commandments and blah, 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 blah. Right? You beast. Sancho looked fixedly at Don Quixote whilst he was uttering these reproaches, and was so stricken with remorse that the tears came into his eyes. Part of it is because the other classroom turns on their Zoom first. Like, she turns it on at like 7 in the morning.
7 in the morning.
Yeah. I mean, is there that little bandwidth, or is it simply that machine?
Simply that machine.
Okay, sorry. We cut out, so I'm gonna just start that again. Sancho looked.
So for the recording, I'm going to post it in 2 parts.
Did you record it?
Mhm.
Sancho looked fixedly at Don Quixote whilst he was uttering these reproaches, and was so stricken with remorse that the tears came into his eyes, and he cried in a weak and sorrowful voice, "Master, I confess that all I need to be complete and to be a complete ass is a tail. If your worship would care to put one on me, I should reckon that I deserved it, and would serve you as an ass for the remainder of my life. Pardon me, your worship, take pity on my youth, consider that I know but little, and if I talk a lot, it proceeds rather from weakness than from malice. But who errs and mends himself to God commends." Is that what you were expecting to happen?
A little bit.
To remind you of anything?
Yeah.
Remind you of anything, people? Zoomers?
No.
St. Peter, maybe? I should have been surprised, Sancho, if you hadn't mixed some little bit of a proverb into your speech. Well, I pardon you, on condition that you mend your ways and show yourself henceforth not quite so greedy in your own interests, but try instead to broaden your mind, and take courage and spirit to hope for the fulfillment of my promises, for though it may be delayed, yet it is not impossible. Do you feel like heaven is one step away? Do you feel like it's impossibly far away? Like, how you're teenagers, how am I going to do this for the next indiscriminate number of decades? Is it worth it? Is it real? Is it true? Do I want to? blah, 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 right? Don't we all think it? Admit it. We all think that. Is it gonna be worth it? Because we have not a lot of consolation at the moment. And instead, our own interests are like, I just want to sleep in on Sunday morning or play baseball. I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to fast. I don't want to follow the commandments. I don't want to. And yet I do it. What for? We know, but we don't know. Right? Am I scandalizing you by saying that? We don't know. I mean, we know, but we don't know. We don't feel it. We're all a little like Sancho. I just want to go in my bed and eat my chips and watch TV. That's what I want to do. And every once in a while, we're like, okay, God. So we look around at my neighbors across the street, and they don't get up on Sunday morning, and they don't have to this, and they get to do that, and blah, 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 blah. And here I am, doing all this stuff that nobody else does. What for? Stop that. You're not open. It's not going to get easier, I can tell you that. It's very real what Sancho is saying, but it's also incredibly real what Don Quixote is answering back and what Don Quixote's been doing through this whole book. And we think he's nuts, and then don't we admire him? Do we? Do you admire him? Or just think he's nuts? But try instead to broaden your mind and take courage and spirit to hope for the fulfillment of my promises, for though it may be delayed, yet it is not impossible. Spoiler alert. Page 764, please. Guess what? Sancho got his isle. And the whole time we're like, this is so mad. It's so ridiculous to think that this crazy guy with this unworking helmet who's running into puppet shows and fighting lions is going to keep his promise of an isle for this guy who calls himself his squire. It's just so unbelievable. Sancho promised compliance, though it meant drawing strength out of weakness. Brother asked, yeah. You know that St. Francis of Assisi called his body Brother Ass? Do you know that? So Don Quixote is the soul, Sancho Panza is the body, and together they're going to make the perfect man eventually. We got to balance things out a little bit. Then they entered the wood where Don Quixote settled himself at the foot of an elm and Sancho at the foot of a beech. For such like trees have feet but no hands. Sancho spent the night in pain, for his beating made itself more felt with the night dew. But Don Quixote passed it in his everlasting meditations, though for all that they both closed their eyes in sleep, and when dawn broke, pursued their journey in search of the banks of the famous Ebro, where an adventure befell them, which will be related in the coming chapter. Nina, are you up for reading a little bit? Chapter 29 of the famous adventure of the enchanted boat. That sounds promising.
Two days by their reckoning after they left the poplar grove, Don Quixote and Sancho came to the river Ebro, the sight of which was a great delight to Don Quixote, as he contemplated and gazed upon the charms of its shores, the clearness of its waters, the smoothness of its stream, and the abundance of its liquid crystal. In fact, this cheering sight recalled 1,000 amorous thoughts to his mind. Especially he dwelt on his vision in the cave of Montesinos, for although Master Peter's ape had told him that part of it was true and part false, he leaned rather to its being true than false. The very opposite view to Sancho's, who considered it all one great lie. Well, as they were riding along in this way, there hove in sight a little boat without oars or any sort of gear, made fast to the trunk of a tree which grew on the bank. Don Quixote looked in all directions, but could see no one. So without more ado, he dismounted from Rocinante and bade Sancho get down from Dapple and tie the two beasts close together to the trunk of a poplar or willow growing there. And on Sancho's inquiring the reason for this sudden dismounting and tethering, Don Quixote answered, I must tell you, Sancho, that this boat, deliberately and beyond all possibility of error, summons me to embark and travel in it to succor some knight or other person of rank in distress. And he must be in very great trouble. For this, as we read in histories of chivalry, is the practice of the enchanters whose actions and speeches they describe. When a knight is placed in some peril from which he can only be delivered by the hand of another knight, though they may be 6 or 8,000, or even more, miles apart, they either snatch the second knight up in a cloud or provide him with a boat to board. And in less than the twinkling of an eye, they take him through the air over the sea, where they will and where his aid is needed. So, Sancho, this boat is put here for that very purpose, and that is as true as it is now day. But before this happens, tie Dapple and Rocinante together, and may God's hand guide us, for I would not fail to embark were barefoot friars to entreat me.
Okay, hold on. Is that true? When a knight is placed in some peril from which he can only be delivered by the hand of another knight, though they be 6 or 8,000 or even more miles apart, they get help. Can that happen?
Yes.
How?
Prayer.
Whenever I'm in trouble, real trouble, I call the convent. They're like 500 miles away. Well, 400 and something. I get help right away. Continue.
Well, as it's like that, replied Sancho, and your worship will run at every step into these follies. I don't know what else to call them. There's nothing for me to but there is nothing for it but to obey and bow my head, according to the proverb. Do what your master's orders and sit down with him at his table. But for all that, for my conscience's sake, I must warn your worship that I don't think this said boat belongs to any of your enchanted folk, but to some fishermen of this river, for they catch the best shad in the world here.
Yeah. If we're having a fire drill, we'll be.
Oh, we're dead. We're dead if there's an actual fire.
No.
We'll be right back. We're having a fire drill. No. Okay, sorry, here we are. Oops, sorry.
Jay Biden.
Hmm.
Is it Biden?
The Enchanted Boat, sorry about that. Okay, Nina, 6:57 in the middle. Do your
This
math,
Sancho
Gordon.
said as he was tying up the bee,
God, you're fine.
leaving the care and protection of the enchanters, with great grief in his heart. But Don Quixote bade him not to worry about abandoning the animals, for he who was to lead them through such longituous ways and regions would take care to provide for them. Don't understand this logicus of yours, said Sancho. I have never heard such a long word in all the days of my life. Longicus, replied Don Quixote, means remote, and it is no wonder you do not understand it, for you are not obliged to know Latin, like some who claim to know it and do not. Now they are tied up, said Sancho. What have we to do next? What, answered Don Quixote, cross ourselves and weigh anchor. I mean, embark and cut the ropes by which this boat is fastened. Then, jumping in with Sancho after him, he cut the boat adrift, and it was carried little by little from the bank. When Sancho found himself some 2 yards offshore, he began to tremble, fearing that he was lost. Nothing caused him more pain than to hear Dapple braying and to see Rocinante struggling to break loose. The ass is braying, he said to his master, for grief at being deserted, and Rocinante is trying to get free to rush after us. Oh, my dearest friends, stay there in peace, and may the madness that takes us from you turn to disappointment and bring us back to your company. At this he began to weep so bitterly that Don Quixote asked peevishly and testily, What are you afraid of, cowardly beast? What are you weeping at, Butterheart? Who is pursuing you or harassing you, soul of a town mouse? What do you lack? Always in need amidst the bowels of abundance? Are you perchance traveling barefoot over the Riffian mountains? No, you are sitting on a bench, like an archduke, on the calm current of this delightful river, from which we shall emerge in a short while into the wide sea. But we must have come out already, and have traveled at least 2,000 miles or more. If I had an astrolabe here with which I could take the height of the pole, I would tell you how far we have gone. Though if I know anything, we have passed, or so shall soon pass, the equinoctial line which divides and cuts the opposite poles at equal distance. And when we get to this noxious line your worship speaks of, asked Sancho, how far shall we have gone? A long way, replied Don Quixote, for we shall have covered the half of the 360 degrees of earth, and water the globe contains according to the computation of Ptolemy, who was the best cosmographer known, when we come to the line I mentioned. By God, said Sancho, but your worship has got me a pretty fellow for a witness of what you say. The same Ptolemy, or whatever you call him, with his amputation. Don Quixote burst out laughing at the interpretation Sancho had put on his name, the computation and the reckoning of the cosmographer Ptolemy, and said, You must learn, Sancho, that according to the Spaniards and those who embark at Cadiz to go to the East Indies, one of the signs by which they know that they have passed the equinoctial line I mentioned is that the lice die on every aboard ship. Not one remains alive, and you could not find one in the whole vessel if you were to be paid its weight in gold. So you might pass a hand over your thigh. If you catch anything living, we shall have no doubts on that score, and if not, then we have passed. I don't believe a word of that, answered Sancho, but I'll do what your worship orders all the same, though I don't know why we need to make these experiments, for I can see with my own eyes that we haven't moved more than 5 yards from the bank. We haven't drawn 2 yards off from where the animals are, for there are Rocinante and Dapple in the very place we left them, and taking our bearings as I do now, I swear we aren't stirring or moving at an ant's pace. Make the investigation I asked of you, Sancho, and do not worry about any others, for you know nothing about the colliers' lines, parallels, zodiacs, ecliptics, poles, solstices, equinoxes, planets, signs of the zodiac, and points, which are the measures of which the celestial and terrestrial spheres are composed. But if you had that knowledge or part of it, you would clearly see how many parallels we have cut, how many signs seen, and what constellations we have left behind and are now leaving. Once more I ask you, feel and fish, for I believe you are as clean as a sheet of smooth white paper. Sancho felt himself, and reaching his hand gently and cautiously behind his left knee, raised his head and looked at his master, saying, "Either the test's false, or we haven't got where your worship says, not by many a mile." "Well, why?" asked Don Quixote. "Have you found anything?" "More than somewhat," answered Sancho, and shaking his fingers, he washed his whole hand in the river, down which the boat was softly gliding in midstream, without any occult intelligence to move it, or any hidden enchanter, but only the current of the water, which was calm and there and smooth. At that moment they caught sight of two great watermills in the middle of the river, and no sooner did Don Quixote view them than he exclaimed to Sancho in a loud voice, "Do you see? There, my friend, stands the city, castle, or fortress. In it must lie the persecuted knight, or the queen or princess in distress, for whose succor I have been brought here." "What the devil does your worship mean by city, fortress, or castle?" answered Sancho. "Can't you see that those buildings in the river are watermills, where they grind the corn?" "Hush, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "They may seem to be watermills, but they are not. I have already told you that spells transform all things and change them from their natural shapes. I do not mean that they actually change them, but they appear to, as we learnt from my experience in the transformation of Dulcinea, sole refuge of my hopes." But this time the boat had got into the middle of the stream, and had begun to travel rather less slowly than before. And when the millers saw it drifting down the river and on the point of being dragged under by the mill stream, a number of them rushed hurriedly out with long poles to stop it. And when they came all floury, with their faces and clothes covered with meal, they presented an ugly appearance, as they shouted out, "Where are you going, you devils? Are you out of your senses? Where are you after? Do you want to drown, or be dashed to pieces on these wheels?" "Did I not tell you, Sancho," exclaimed Don Quixote at this, "that we have reached a place where I have to show the strength of my arm? Look what scoundrelly villains have come out to encounter me. Look what fiends are opposing me. Look at those ugly faces grimacing at us. Now then you shall see, Rose." And standing up in the boat, he began to threaten the millers, crying out loud, "Ugly and ill-advised rabble, set free and deliver him whom you keep under duress in this fortress or prison of yours, be he of high or low, or of whatever degree. For I am Don Quixote de la Mancha, otherwise called the Knight of the Lions, for whom by heaven's high destiny the happy accomplishment of this adventure is reserved." As he spoke, he grasped his sword, and began to make passes in the air against the millers, who, hearing but not understanding these raving, wielded their poles to stop the boat, which was now entering into the rapids of the mill race. Sancho went down on his knees, devoutly praying heaven to rescue him from his imminent peril, which it did, thanks to the prompt efforts of the millers, who planted their poles against the boat and stopped it, but not so skillfully as to prevent its overturning and throwing Don Quixote and Sancho head over heels into the water. Fortunately for the knight, he could swim like a duck, though the weight of his armor took him twice to the bottom, and if it had not been for the millers, who plunged into the water and dragged them both out bodily, it would have been good-bye to the pair of them. Then, when they were brought to land drenched and dark, far from dying of thirst, Sancho went down on his knees and, with hands joined and eyes fixed to heaven, implored God in a long devout prayer to deliver him from all his master's rash plans and enterprises in future. By this time the fishermen had arrived, who owned the boat, which had been broken to pieces by the mill wheels, and when they saw it smashed, they set about stripping Sancho and demanding payment of Don Quixote, who told the millers and the fishermen very calmly, as if nothing had happened, that he would pay for the boat and with the best will in the world, providing that they would set free the person or persons who were oppressed in that castle, without ransom. "What persons and what castle are you talking of, madman?" asked one of the millers. "Can it be the people who come to this mill to have their corn ground that you want to carry off?" "Enough," said Don Quixote to himself. "It would be preaching in the wilderness to try and induce this rabble by prayers to do any virtuous act. Two powerful enchanters must have met in opposition in this adventure, the one frustrating the other's designs, one providing me with the boat, and the other threw me out. God help us, but this whole world is tricks and devices, one against the other. I can do no more." And raising his voice, he went on He went on gazing all the while at the watermills. "Friends, whoever you are, who lie locked up in this prison, pardon me, for unfortunately for myself and for you, I cannot deliver you from your affliction. This adventure must remain reserved for another night." Saying this, he compounded with the fishermen, and paid them 50 reals for the boat, and Sancho handed the money over with very ill grace, saying, "Two boat trips like this will sink our whole fortune to the bottom." The fishermen and the millers gazed in astonishment at those two figures, so unlike other men, and were quite unable to make out what Don Quixote was driving at, but concluded that both knight and squire were mad. They left them, the millers returning to their mill, and the fishermen to their huts. Don Quixote and Sancho went back to their beasts, and their beast-like existence. Oh, and to their beast-like existence. And such was the end of the adventure of the enchanted boat.
Thank you, Nina. I will not see you the rest of the day because we don't have a second period. There's no homework except to say, keep thinking about what you're gonna do for your final essay, because it's coming faster than you think. And I have no idea what that enchanted boat thing was about. Feel that it's like we're back at the beginning of the story, doesn't it? Except that he didn't keep fighting, whereas before he would have been like, let me get up into those towers. Thank you.